Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alicia Yu, and I will be your MC for today. Thank you all for taking the time to tune in to our virtual GuruTalk seminar on the topic Prime Properties in Singapore, Investing in Upmarket Residential. This event is brought to you by PropertyGuru and M+S Private Limited. Today's showcase project is Marina One Residences. Marina One is an integrated development located in the heart of Marina Bay District and comprises of luxurious residences, retail, and Grade A offices. It is walking distance to world-class lifestyle offerings such as MBS, Gardens by the Bay, and Singapore Flyer. Marina One is the only development in the city with a 65,000 square feet garden within the development. It is located next to Marina Bay and downtown MRT stations, which serves 4 MRT lines, making commuting a breeze. Presenting Marina One Residences by M+S Private Limited. Before we kickstart today's session, I would like to highlight that we will be announcing the lucky 20 winners that will be walking away with a $50 Grab voucher each at the end of the show. So stay tuned to find out if you're one of our lucky winners for tonight. Also, that's not all the goodies we have lined up for today. Webinar attendees turned purchasers of Marina One Residences one bidder will also walk away with $10,000 worth of furniture vouchers courtesy of M+S Private Limited. During our initial RSVP days for this event, we also received an overwhelming amount of questions ranging from the generic market updates to property investment tips. While we appreciate the questions, we must apologize in advance that we unfortunately would not be able to answer each and every one of them due to time constraints. Our panel of esteemed speakers today have gone through your questions, consolidated the most asked questions, which they will address in our Q&A section later. Following on from that, if timing permits, we will also be taking questions from our audience here today. Please submit your questions through the Q&A feature you see on the screen. And now, let's kickstart today's fireside chat. This evening, we have invited highly respected industry individuals to share key information and expert insights to explore the future of Singapore's prime properties. Our speakers for today are no stranger to the property market. I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Mr. Winston Lee, Director of Special Projects for PropertyGuru Group. Winston is a digital media strategist, a seasoned and serial real estate investor. His current portfolio includes residential, commercial, and industrial properties across 5 different countries: Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, UK, and Australia. Also sharing his insights with us tonight, we have Mr. Nicholas Mak, Head of the Research and Consultancy Department in ERA Realty Network. With more than 20 years of experience in the real estate industry, Nicholas provides real estate advisory services to major organizations such as the Singapore government, real estate funds, developers, and financial institutions. Also here with us tonight is Mr. Lam Chern Woon, Senior Director, Research and Consulting at Edmund Tie. Chern Woon is responsible for delivering thought-leading research and driving consulting profitability at Edmund Tie. Chern Woon started his career as an economist with the Monetary Authority of Singapore and has worked in other roles like strategic planning and investment strategy. He has 20 years of research experience across real estate, strategy, investment, and economics. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part on today's GuruTalk. Without further ado, I will now dive into our discussion on prime properties in Singapore, investing in upmarket residential. Over to you, Winston.
Thank you, Alicia, for your introduction. Good evening, my friends. Welcome to GuruTalk. And I must first express my pleasure to see so many of you spend evening with us to know more about the market, and also happy to be in the same panel with my good old friend Nicholas. It's a reunion for both of us also. Before I go into the panel discussion proper, let me just share with you some very interesting data point coming from Property Guru to let all of us know where we are now in the property cycle, because I believe as an investor, we need to know where we are in the property cycle in order to make an informed and confident decision to make our next move in the property market. Next slide, please. So we know that a property cycle means that the market will go up and it will also come down. So it's very important for us as a property owner, buyer, seller to know where we are. And there are three main data that we will look at in determining whether we are in an uptrend or a downtrend in a property cycle. The first data point is really the transaction price, which we can obtain quite easily from URA. They always publish the price index on a quarterly basis. And second is also the transaction volume. So the transaction volume also gives us an indication on whether the market is bullish or bearish. Last but not least is the consumer sentiments. Consumer sentiments is something that is less available, definitely not available from URA or other sources. But the good news is that Property Guru, because we are the market leader in Singapore, and we command the lion's share of the property seekers' online behavior, we are able to use two index for us to proxy the market sentiments. So the first index I want to share with you guys is the property price index, or the PPI. So the property price index effectively measure the average asking price of the property that are being listed in Property Guru. So if you look at the property price index of the last 4 quarters, which we have 2020 Q2, Q3, Q4, as well as 2021 Q1, which is the last quarter, we see that very interestingly, the impact of COVID-19, especially at the early stage of the COVID-19, and even coupled with the impact of a lockdown in Singapore, does not really affect the buyer sentiment so much. Hence, you see that the property price index has largely maintained in Q2 and Q3. There isn't really a drop. So it goes to show that COVID-19 does not deter the Singaporean sentiments in terms of buying a property. In fact, when you look at Q4 2020 and leading up to Q1 2021, you notice a sizable increase in the property price index. What we are saying is that the average asking price in Q4 last year and Q1 this year actually shot up by quite a fair bit. And this is also reflected in the URA price index as well. So sentiments price is not affected. Next slide. The other data point that we use to proxy sentiments is the property supply index. So what the property supply index does is it measures the number of properties that are being put up as a listing to sell in Property Guru. So of course, when we have a low index, it means that there's not many units of property available for sale. And when you have a high index, it means that there's a lot of property fighting to be sold in the market. So what we do see here is that the impact of COVID-19 lockdown does create a very sharp increase in the supply index in Property Guru. That means what you see is that the lockdown, which take effect in the later part of Q1 and all the way extend to Q2 last year, actually effectively means the supply shot up. It means that there are not that many buyers who come and absorb the supply of listing in Property Guru. However, having said that, we also noticed that there's also a sharp reduction in supply when it comes to Q3 2020 and also Q4 2020, and the supply continue to drop in Q1 this year. So what does it mean? What we say is that as far as the supply sentiments is concerned, we are seeing a very sharp V-shaped recovery. Yes, COVID-19 dampened the market a little bit in terms of supply. There's a lot of build-up inventory in the Q2, Q3, but yet the absorption of inventory is also fast and furious when it comes to Q3 and Q4. Again, this points to the overall resilience of the Singapore property market. Next slide. Yeah, and now we talk about Q2, which is the latest quarter that has passed for this year. Again, Q2 is a very is an abnormal situation because Q2 is also the quarter when the Singapore government implement another new round of circuit breaker. Although this circuit breaker is not as harsh as the last year, but it's still some kind of circuit breaker where people are not able to move around that much and limit social interaction. So what we do see here is despite this circuit breaker and despite the June holiday traditionally being a low month for property market, based on the URA flash estimate, we are still seeing a marginal increase in the transacted price for the private residential property in Singapore. So again, this goes to show that the circuit breaker does not really affect the market that much. The market is strong enough to withstand the circuit breaker, and I'm bullish that after this Q2 circuit breaker leading up to Q3, Q4, when this control is being removed, the market will rebound back to the growth trajectory that we see back in Q1 this year. Next slide. Yeah. So effectively, one of the key findings we have is property prices record almost 3-year high. The vibrant market is not really caused by affordable credit. It's actually caused by the vibrant upgrading by the HDB upgrader, where they see this as a good opportunity with COVID-19, with reasonable pricing by developer and also by the sellers, that this is a good time to enter the market. Of course, the low interest rate also helps them to make the decision faster. And we are also seeing early symptoms of a seller's market, meaning to say, if you notice the supply index graph I shared earlier, we are seeing an all-time low of the supply, and we have also heard of stories of some of the property people are really competing for it, and agents can sell it pretty quickly, and if you are not fast enough, you may lose that to another buyer. So we are hearing all this from the ground also, and of course the supply overhang that we spoke about in the last couple of years are apparently clearing from the low supply index that you see. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I have largely summarized the outlook of the Singapore market using the proprietary data from the PropertyGuru, our supply and demand index. Now is the interesting part that we can go into to get some views from the expert panel of Nicholas and Chern Woon. So to start the ball rolling, Chern Woon, maybe you would like to start by giving us your views in terms of the key trends in the prime property sector, looking at the new prime areas like District 1, 2, and 7 emerging within the central CBD, Tanjong Pagar, Marina Bay area. Yeah, Chern Woon, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Winston. So if you talk about downtown living, actually living in the CBD a decade ago, right, it's actually almost unheard of. Back then, you only have iconic projects like The Sale and another old project like Emerald Gardens, completed in 1999. So besides Emerald Gardens that's really located closer towards Chinatown, for the rest of the CBD projects, taken in isolation, they don't really have much retail offering. So if you talk about living in a, as they call it, a ghost town in CBD, it's really quite true.
Yes.
But over the last decade, we have certainly seen a huge growth in terms of the CBD housing, much more dynamic, and this has been catalyzed by many mixed-use developments that have come on stream. So for instance, you have 2010, starting with Marina Bay Residences, 2013, Marina Bay Suites, and more recently, from 17-18 onwards, you have projects like Warwick Residences, Beyond Shenton, and also Marina One Residences. So as a result, things are much more vibrant now, and the housing stock, just looking at the last 5 years, has grown by almost 30% or 40%, I would say. But if you look at, say, the traditional prime areas of districts 9, 10, and 11, where they are much more established in nature, the growth of housing stock has been more muted there, about 3 or 4% only. So one thing interesting about the new prime areas, right, because it's established only in the last decade, the housing developments are very new. So as you know, new developments, they will come with the latest home design, layout efficiencies, even facilities, or another thing that's very common nowadays is smart home technology. So one example, like Marina One Residences, I believe there's this app called MySphere. So it's like a smart work, live, life integrated platform. So it manages your community management as well as your lifestyle offerings. You can use it to book your facilities, you can get handyman services, or even use the bespoke concierge. And another thing is the unit sizes in the downtown areas, they're actually smaller because of so much convenience and amenities, right? A lot of people will be spending their time outside at the eateries, even nightlife and so on. So as a result, the unit size may not be so large. And of course, another rationale really relates to the lifestyle of the people as well as their family structure. So some may be singles or just small families, young couples. So I really think there's going to be more vibrant going forward. You have more mixed developments coming on stream. And Marina Bay Sands, they're going to have a 4th tower. So Central Boulevard Towers is going to come up across La Paz Market. And then if you look across at Tanjong Pagar side, there are some old projects like Esa Tower, Fuji Xerox. All these are old commercial buildings, but they're going to be redeveloped into other mixed-use developments. And the interesting thing about this whole CBD, right, if you look at it that as a whole, it's going to be seamlessly connected to the Greater Southern Waterfront in future. So it's going to be much more seamless in nature. And with the offerings in GSW, I think it's going to boost the attractiveness of downtown living as well.
Okay, Chern Woon, I think one interesting point I picked up earlier from your comments is the emergence of this smart home technology, particularly in some of these new projects in the downtown new CBD area. I just very curious to know, is it because the kind of market segmentation and profile of the buyers of this new CBD apartment belong to a certain demographic group, therefore there's a fit in terms of the product features like smart home technology?
Yeah, actually I would say the answer is yes and no. Yes, because if you look at downtown, right, the residents tends to be younger. So the younger crowd, they're more tech savvy. Definitely they will really enjoy the offerings of the smart tech that gives them a lot of convenience and how they can manage their home. But really, if you look at it, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, across the island, not just in downtown, many developers are already offering such tech offerings in their projects. So you can have like camera to view your guests, you can video call with them wherever you are at home, you can control your air conditioning, and even booking of facilities. And this thing I thought was quite good, especially now we have e-commerce on the rise. Some of them has like a smart parcel locker. So if you're not at home, your delivery guy can just drop it at the locker and you can collect it when you're home. So a lot of all this has really improved the quality of life, I would say. And it's not so easily found, especially in the old projects. But really in the new ones, we are seeing more of that. So it's more of a nationwide trend, but I think especially in the downtown, the developers know that it's going to be increasingly well received as well.
Yeah, very interesting and very cool product features as well. Now I would like to pivot to something more macro and direct the question to Nicholas. Nicholas, so what do you think, just now Chun Wu mentioned about master plan. So what do you think of the key strategy highlighted in the master plan 2019, especially with what Chun Wu mentioned, and how does it relate to the new apartments in the new CBD? And also, what are your thoughts on creating residential communities in city location? Do you think it will be successful? Yep.
I think many of us have heard of the phrase work, live, and play. And I think the first time I heard this phrase was like more than 22 years ago. So URA, the government has actually planned to develop the downtown area to be not just a traditional workplace, and we can see some of these examples of some of these sort of workplaces in major metropolitan cities such as Manhattan, in the financial districts of London, and in Seoul, where basically during the morning a lot of people, thousands of them, will commute to work there, and in the evening they all go back. The direction is reversed, and on Saturday, Sunday, and public holidays, these financial districts are ghost town. And actually Raffles Place do have this phenomenon, but I think the government do want to encourage more people to more families eventually to live there. But the nature of real estate economics is that the highest, usually in the city center where real estate is the highest, it will go to the type of use that actually attracts the highest type of the people, the tenants that are willing to pay the highest amount of money, and that typically in the Singapore, in fact in any major cities, it will be the office users. Of course, the retailers would pay a bit more, but then that's belong more towards the shopping belt of Orchard Road. So the master plan 2019 actually reinforced the government's direction to try to encourage a more live-in population in the CBD area. And one of the initiatives that the government has introduced is to try to encourage the owners of some of the older buildings that are more than, say, 20 years old in the older part of downtown, like for example, Shenton Way, Anson area, to redevelop or refurbish their existing building to include more residential component to the tune of about 25 to 30%. And of course, they can still keep part of it as commercial, and they were also given incentive to also redevelop it either for residential or hotel use. Another initiative by the government is that they have sold parcels of lands from time to time. Some of them are white side, some usually they are not just for single use. They can be, depending on what the government thinks that will be the demand, the type of space that will be in demand in 3 to 4 years' time. Some of them are more geared towards being developed into an office building. Some are more a mix of office, hotel, and residential. And the most recent one, where the tender was just launched several days ago, is for a white site at Marina View. And this site was triggered for, it can be developed to over 1 million square feet of gross floor area, and it was triggered by a developer to the tune of $1.5 billion. So the land cost is about $1,378 per square foot per plot. So that is already looking at just a per square foot of land, buildable space on the land, is already almost the price of a condominium in the suburban areas.
Right.
And that is just for the land price. So but by and large, the direction is that the government do want to have more to also incorporate residential development, residential space within the downtown area.
Right. Nicholas, I think what we do know, and I think it was mentioned earlier, that the government effort to do this live, work, and play in the CBD is something that was mooted as far back as even 20 years ago. So what do you think have changed 20 years ago and 20 years from then until now? what do you think has changed that will make this live, work, and play vision a successful one?
Well, first of all, there are now more residential development in the downtown area, not just for perhaps the first group of them. The first batch that came out was when office building was torn down and redeveloped as residential development, like One Shenton is one example. And so that comes about, also depends on the market cycle. You know, when residential prices are rising and ends up residential price per square foot is even higher than office space. There was an anomaly, and in the middle of last decade, it led some developers to redevelop that into their office building, into condo. But I think the government wants a bigger push. That means they want more development there, and I think that's led to the sale of a few major land parcels in the Marina Bay area, which was redeveloped into a few development like Marina Bay residences and Marina One residences. So those are some of the major developments there that are now actually available for occupancy. So that is one. The second thing is the development of the public transport infrastructure there. In the Marina Bay area, it is served by 3 MRT lines. Right? 3 MRT line. I think it's one of the most concentrated area in Singapore that has so many lines. You have the red line, which is a north-south line. You have the orange line, which is a circle line, and then you have the blue line, the downtown line. And there's a fourth line coming up, the brown one, the Thomson East Coast line. Yeah? So there is actually a fairly high concentration of MRT stations around the Marina Bay area. Now, having a lot of MRT stations there, it actually brings convenience to people who live in the downtown area, because in the downtown area, space is expensive, so is car park space. So some of the government also want to encourage a car light policy there. So residents there may not need to own a car. They can actually take public transport, and if you really need to take a vehicle, you can always call Grab, right? That is the other thing. But having a lot of MRT stations, well, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because it allows the residents to also move out of there. That means visit their friends elsewhere in Singapore. It allows people to move in, but it also allows a large number of people to travel to the CBD as well for work. So it provides conveniences for moving people in and out.
Okay, nice. So I think one of the key success factor is now in the downtown area, we have all the hardware infrastructure ready to serve residents to live there. But of course, we do know that the other side of hardware is the software. So I'd like to turn my attention to Chern Woon. What are some of the lifestyle, recreational, and cultural choices for people who live in the downtown area?
You know, some people, they will say that if you live in downtown, right, what you have for your neighbors are the commercial buildings. That is not wrong. And actually, if you like commercial buildings like me, that is actually a good thing. But more seriously, right, in terms of offerings, there's actually quite a plenty, I would say. So lifestyle-wise, food, you know, Singaporeans love food. You have La Pasa in the Marina Bay, Raffles Place area. In Tanjong Pagar, you have established food street over there along the whole Tanjong Pagar Road. A lot of cafes and clubs as well. And then even at Bugis side, you have Sia Street, Bugis Street, Tan Kee Lan Street, famous for its hot pot. So these are really offering an abundance of options. In terms of retail, you also have, even in Bay Area, you have like the one at Marina One Residences is called The Heart, and then you have By the Bay, the Underground Mall, and also One Raffles Place. And in Bugis side, you have Suntec City, a very large mall, and Bugis Junction as well. So for the environmentally conscious people, this is also something that they can live out their values. I think like what Nicholas said, the area is so well connected, you really don't need a car. And so some will compare like, okay, but what about the noise, because it's in downtown? Actually, it's probably maybe not so much a well-known secret, but actually it can be very tranquil in town as well, because a lot of the working population, they are transient anyway. So in terms of people who live in families, most of them do not have young children. So it can be really quite, probably more tranquil than your standard condos on weekends, per se.
True.
So recreation, Gardens by the Bay, just at the doorstep, Marina Barrage, they are good for cycling, jogging, kite flying, and then with the gyms and yoga studios in the vicinity, you can have a lot of classes and options.
Right.
And staycations if you want. So culture, I'm not a culture person, but if you look at it, there's really a lot of museums, galleries in the vicinity as well. So I think this is probably something that people have not really considered. It could be something that, we can look into it a bit more, because there's really no lack of options for them.
Yes. Not to mention, I recall the Michelin star restaurants and fine along the downtown area. So it seems that it has a very good balance of hardware and software to make living there very pleasurable. I would like to then turn my attention to Nicholas. If we look at District 1, the CBD area, how would you say is the supply and demand condition like?
Well, for the CBD area, I think I trying to find some statistics about this area, but the available statistics is more for the CCR, the Core Central Region. Now, the average for last year, the occupancy rate for residential space in the average of in 2019, pre-COVID, was about 92.4%. So, but during the COVID period, which was from last year to now, it has dropped slightly to 91.1%. The drop is actually not that major. It's just about 1 percentage points, and typically such a drop it can recover quite quickly when, for example, economic slowdown comes to an end, or the pandemic is eventually contained. One of the causes for the slowdown is because during if you recall, like last year, the lockdown and so on, some of the foreign talents actually returned to their home country. So you got a case of rising vacancy for some of the residential development. But I see this as more of a short-term period. As for the some of the developments that is in the downtown area, because the new residential projects that's launched and offered for sale are not something that happens every year. In fact, sometimes you might have to wait for 2-3 years before a new project is launched. As a result, most of the projects that are now completed and fully sold by the developer. So buyers could only buy from the resale market, with the exception of perhaps Marina One residences that still have some vacant units left. I think if buyers want to buy something that is in the downtown area, if it's not, either they have to turn to the resale market, or they may even have to wait for a long time before this new white site at Marina View. I think the tender will close in a few months' time. It will probably only be launched for sale in somewhere like 2023. So yes, supply is a bit patchy, but I think for buyers who are looking to buy in the downtown area, there are still options. There are still choices.
Winston, you're muted.
Chern Woon, any further thoughts on that? Are there any specific demographics that we see are taking a lead in owning a property in the CBD area? What kind of trend are we seeing?
If you talk about the residents, most of them are in their 20s or 30s, so they're quite young. And actually, singles are also quite a prominent group. We look at the residents in the downtown core planning area, right? About 40% of them are singles. But your question is about ownership. So the data is harder to come at, but from our analysis, we find that the HDB upgraders and the foreigners, they form a larger share of demand for, say, the new prime areas compared to the traditional prime areas. So one factor could be that for the HDB upgraders especially, is that we talk about the sizing of homes in the new prime areas, they are smaller. So that also means that the quantum is also smaller. So for last year, the median price of like new prime homes was about 1.5 million dollars, and then for the traditional prime was 2.1 million. So you can see the difference there. That is quite a significant lighter load on the wallet, I would say. Then for some of them, even if they are looking at investment purchases, there'll be that group, but we're also seeing quite a fair bit coming in to buy for own stay because they just desire a place that's near to their work and as well as convenient with amenities. So at that stage in life, that's what matters for them. And only when they start a family, that's when considerations for schools come in, and they may consider other locations.
Right.
If I may, yes, share screen for this. Okay, I wonder if you can see from the, are you able to see the Excel sheet? Okay, well, you can see from here that what we discovered is that if you look at the rest of the suburban areas outside central region, roughly about 80% of the buyers are Singaporeans, while the Singapore PR make up about 17.3%, and foreigners who are not PR actually make up a very small percentage, less than 2%. But in the in District 1, where the downtown core also covers part of downtown core, Singaporeans make up roughly about 2/3 of the buyers there, and the rest is fairly evenly split between the PRs and the non-PR foreigners. Right. So we see that in the buyers of in District 1s, of the residential development in District 1s, almost 1 in 3 are foreigners. So we do, and among the foreigners, let me see if I can move to the, come on. Okay, I have to stop here because I just have to change the screen. Okay. Among the foreigners, one of the biggest group of buyers are actually the mainland Chinese. Seems like the mainland Chinese love District 1 very much. And the second group, almost 11%, are those from the US. And then followed by Malaysia and Indonesia, and Malaysia, Australia, Korea, and so on. So so it's quite, I've heard of anecdotal comments from some of the agents is that it seems like maybe because for some of the mainland Chinese who are more experienced, they have already invested in China before, they have invested perhaps in Hong Kong, and they have some of these groups have a preference for buying in the downtown area. Right. They like to buy where it is near a financial area because they find that, in their opinion, it's easier to rent out there. Or perhaps even some of them might even be working here in Singapore in the downtown area. So that is perhaps one of their preference, because some of these Chinese investors, they are used to investing in in some of these Chinese cities, and sometimes it's quite difficult to invest near their financial districts because the city is always growing, the Chinese city, and it's always growing outwards. So the new properties are always in the suburbs. So to buy something in the city center tends to be fairly old buildings. To be able to find a new building for sale, a new residential development for sale, is something very rare. And when they see that, in Singapore, in the Marina Bay area, they have new developments, some of them see that this opportunity not to be missed.
Wow. Very interesting. So I think to summarize, we see a lot of very interesting and favorable factors going on in District 1. We hear about the strong connectivity with so many MRT lines, boosting the hardware infrastructure of being able to live in the downtown area. We also heard about the various software element, the lifestyle amenity, and the recreation opportunity for residents who live there. And on top of that, we also hear about what the fellow two speaker mentioned about how the downtown area has transformed and evolved to be a popular choice not only for the HDB upgraders, as well as for the foreign buyers. So I think this is a very, very interesting location for investors and buyers, owner-occupier to really consider. In the interest of time, I would now like to move on to the next segment, which is effectively the question and answer segment. Okay, so what happened is we have received many questions from the audience even prior to the webinar. So what we do is we will attempt to group the questions in certain grouping and try to summarize them into a few questions that majority of the audience have submitted and want to know. So we will tackle this question first, and after that, we will try to leave some time to take a couple of questions from the live audience over here as well. The first question that we have grouped together, which has a lot of popularity, is in the past, under what circumstances did the government implement cooling measure, and are we seeing the same situation now? So we know a lot of audience are thinking about will there be a new cooling measure being implemented? So I would like to maybe can call upon Chern Woon to answer, then followed by Nicholas. Yeah, Chern Woon, over to you.
Okay, I'll tell you something interesting. Sometimes, right, all this talk about cooling measures,
yes,
maybe they are thought about by the agents because they want you to buy first.
Okay.
But I mean, okay, if you look at the past, right, cooling measures, usually they come about when the market is overheated, when the government knows that they have to step in. So there's a lot of euphoria, rising prices, and then speculation. Like in the past, you hear of people flipping condos, long queues before the launch, and then they buy something and they can sell the option half an hour later. So those things, they have come to an end already. I mean, now you have the seller stamp duty, you limit such activities. Then also in terms of our exposure to foreign demand, that has also been more moderate. I think like Nicholas showed that chart for OCL was quite low. Even for prime areas, at the height after the GFC, right, 2011, it was about 30%. 30% of all home purchases were by foreigners. But now it's more moderate at, I would say maybe 7 to 8%. So we are not so much in the state of affairs that was in the past. The only similarity I would say would be in terms of the land bids. Some of the GIS land bids, they are getting a bit more active now. We have seen like a record price for EC, and even for some other sites, they have been creeping up slowly. So I think we do need to watch that. The MAS says that the property market is not overheated, but again, we need to watch the prices carefully. So probably nothing major in the near term. So I think let's not be overly thinking about what is cooling measure. I should really buy something currently. As always, buy within your means, I would say.
Yeah, agree. How about Nicholas? What's your view about this cooling measure concern or question?
I think the most visible index that people often look at is the price index, the property price index. And they think that, oh, the property price index is up again. And every time when that happens, reporters might ask me, is it time, is the government going to implement cooling measures? But because it is such a visible index, people may not be aware that probably the government looks at a lot of other indexes, a lot of other indicators, and they are not telling us what are the indicators they're looking at. I believe they're looking at things like, for example, transactions as well. They're looking at household debt, the level of indebtedness, how much is the property loans on the books of the banks? Is there any systemic risk? And perhaps they even look at, for example, what is the sentiments on the ground, the visitorship to show flats and so on, to try to gauge whether is the market overheated, because there is, it would be a lot easier on everyone if the government specify that, oh, this is the weightage, I put 20% on price index, I put 10% on this and that, and then once it hits above a certain level, out comes the cooling measures. But that doesn't happen. So which is why the government keeps everybody in the property market on their toes. So very recently, Mr. Menon, the managing director of MAS, has publicly said that the market is not overheated, but the government is still watching the market very closely. So I think in the short term, we can take it that there won't be any cooling measures in the meantime. But let's wait and see, because there have been, in the past, the government has ever implemented cooling measures when the price index is rising, but rising at a slower and slower rate. Okay, so in the opinion of many market watchers is that the price growth is slowing down, and then next thing, after 6 p.m., the government announces a cooling measures, and everybody scramble. So the caveat here is that we will never know, but at least in the meantime, perhaps this quarter or so, there won't be any cooling measures.
Right. Well, I think personally, from an investor point of view, the way I look at it is the reason why our Singapore residential market has been able to hold our price despite the worst pandemic that ever happened in this century, while many other markets are suffering, is precisely because of our existing cooling measure that prevent speculators from coming into the market, making sure that whoever wants to come into the Singapore residential market are coming for the long haul as well. So to another extent, I do not also see the existing cooling measure as a necessary evil. In fact, the way I look at it, it has helped to keep speculation at check and manage to make our market more resilient and more healthy in the long term as well. Yep. Okay, I would like to take another question that came from the audience prior to the webinar. What will the CBD be like in the years to come, especially the retail and commercial units that are currently underutilized due to the pandemic? Chern Woon, you want to start first?
So one obvious strategy will be continuing to bring life to the CBD, because right now the retail assets especially they don't really have a lot of traffic, and with people working from home. So the increasing mixed-use developments that are coming on stream, that's going to help. You have things like Capital Spring coming up, Central Boulevard Towers, and the incentive scheme that Nicholas mentioned, the CBD incentive scheme, that's also going to be helpful as well. On another note, I'm personally quite excited about the retail arcades that the government mentioned in the master plan. So you look at places like Cecil Street, Anson Road, they are going to come out with all these arcades, similar to what you see in Sydney, in Melbourne, where you have one block of asset, right, retail asset, and then you have this walkway that you can move from the main street to the one at the back. So it's very interesting. You can really hop from one street to another, and you travel through the building. There's a lot of shops, a lot of kiosks there. So that's something that will really transform the look and feel of our CBD. And then when the Greater Southern Waterfront is up, we talk about them having more offerings. One important thing really will be schools. Now there's already childcare in the CBD, but if you're going to have schools that caters to, say, even the, children of a higher going age, then that's going to allow more people to take up roots in downtown as well.
Right. How about Nicholas? Any views on this question?
Well, I think one of the big game changer that will come about is when the government start developing the Greater Southern Waterfront, because the land price in the downtown area, including Marina Bay, and even if we go down to say the Marina View, which is near to Shenton Way, the land price is high. So quite likely, yes, you can have residential there, but I think it's unlikely the government will build like schools, a primary school or secondary school in that area. But the Greater Southern Waterfront, which is a large stretch of land, going from all the way from Tanjong Rhu area, Marina East, all the way to the Keppel Road area, down to even including the harbourfront area. So this large stretch of land when it's opened up for development, there could be even condominium, HDB flats, town centers, things that you normally find perhaps in HDB town centers. So you're going to have a more live-in population, and eventually this will also transform the commercial space in the existing CBD area, which you might have perhaps more high-end dining or retail in that particular area, while you have a more city fringe kind of developments in the Greater Southern Waterfront. So I think that yes, it will take time, because the Greater Southern Waterfront is not something that's going to be developed over a 3 to 5 years period. It could take 10 to 20 years to redevelop this area. I just give you an example. The Marina Bay area, the first piece of land, the government tried to launch the first piece of land for sale in 1997. But in 98, there was a financial crisis. So the first piece of land was put on hold. So you see, from there to now, over 20 years, there was already, it's more than 20 years, so almost 30 years. Now, over this period of time, there's still vacant land there in the Marina Bay area for sale. So it takes a long time for something like that. And I think that's a good thing, because what for you rush and build something very fast. Okay, I know Singapore is known as a country of instant trees. LTA and NPark can basically plant trees very fast. But to build something too fast, what if our needs, our culture, our demographic change over time? So the needs for real estate also change over time. So it's better to develop gradually and to adapt the type of space for the needs of the population as the population changes.
Right. Okay, cool. So in the interest of time, I would like to start taking a couple of questions from the audience live. So there's this question asked by Mr. Chan, which is, the current low or negligible interest rate is fueling the property and stock markets. So how do you see the property market as if interest rate were to rise in the next 3 to 5 years? So I think this is the interest rate global monetary policy question. Chern Woon, you want to take that first?
Sure. I feel that with the macroprudential measures over the years, households have definitely been prevented from overextending themselves. And yes, rates are going to rise. We are tied, very open economy, tied very closely to what is the rates in the US by the US Fed. And they've already given signal that they're going to raise by 2022, 23, but it's really quite nominal, only like 50 basis points.
Right.
When we take a loan with the financial institution, like now, right, new loans for new property purchase, you can get it at 1.1, 1.2%. It's very cheap. But that doesn't mean your income just needs to be able to support that mortgage. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a median price of a suburban home, a condominium, 1.4 million. Your mortgage at 1.2% probably works out to be about, if I remember, maybe 3,005 or so. Then because of that 60% TDSR ruling, right, your minimum income needs to be about, I think, 6,000 or so. But really, it doesn't mean if you have $6,000 of income, you can go ahead and get a loan for this, because there's that stress test component by MAS. The stress test is set at 3.5%. So the MAS mandates that the banks must be totally comfortable that you can support the loan, your mortgage payment, even when interest rates go to 3.5%.
Right.
So in the example I mentioned, right, your household income needs to be 8K.
Right.
Which is not too impossible for maybe fresh grads with professional degrees after working a few years. But my point is, if you look at 3.5% versus now, for now, right, most of the ongoing interest rates, even for your recurring loans, probably 1.something%. Still quite a long way. So, and if that has already been a safeguard, I don't see a big issue, honestly, on the interest rates front.
Okay.
Probably more in terms of if there's massive unemployment and people totally cannot make payments.
Sure. How about Nicholas?
Well, I think I agree with Chern Woon. The stress test that's already incorporated into the total debt servicing ratio, actually, which is set at assumed interest rate of 3.5%, will actually prevent over leverage, over borrowing by home buyers. So even if interest rate were to increase, I think buyers who are buying for their own stay, that means buying properties for their own family, such as HDB upgraders or people just going into the market for the first time to buy private property, I think this group of people will be less affected if they can afford to buy that property and it's something that they aspire to own.
Right.
They will. It may affect certain groups of borderline investors. That means investors may have to stretch themselves financially in order to buy that second or third property. It could discourage them from doing that because that higher interest rates may make it either a bit more risky, or they even make it in a way that their rental may not be able to cover the interest servicing the servicing of the loan component. So as a result, this group of buyers may exit from the market.
Okay, right. Thanks. Right, I'll pick this last question from the audience. I think this question is probably asked by an investor. So the question is, are integrated development the way forward for property investor in Singapore now? So maybe you guys can shed some light from an investor point of view. What are the consideration or what are the benefits of investing in integrated development? Yeah, Chern Woon.
I think it's going to be increasingly popular, especially now, with COVID, many of us are working from home. So this whole concept of work, live, life, play, and the government's push towards decentralization, having your self-contained town. So a mixed D is like a self-contained town, but probably on a much smaller scale. So just imagine if, actually right now I'm at home, if you are cooped up at home, nothing to do, the home design matters, having your adequate balconies, having a nice view, but more importantly than that also, if you have amenities below, greenery spaces, that's going to be helpful as well. So there's going to be a premium for that, which is why I think while there's a positive aspect to mixed D, it's going to be increasingly popular. Some people may or may not want to pay that premium. So there's still a room for your usual standalone apartments or condominiums. So I think it depends on the preference of the individual. One way to arbitrage, for instance, is if you were to purchase a unit that is near to a mixed D, then maybe you can do away without the premium, but you can still pop over to the other project. Yeah, that's an option as well.
Okay, thank you. How about Nicholas?
Well, one thing about integrated development, and I assume he means that it's a residential development on top of a commercial development and linked to MRT stations. I think that yes, it does. I agree with Chern Woon. It will bring a lot of conveniences, especially if, let's say, you work from home will become more common. So people who wants to just go to the supermarket and buy a few things, they wouldn't need to take the bus or train. They just need to go downstairs, and the conveniences are there. But there is no free lunch. So if yes, the conveniences are there for residents of integrated development, but integrated developments, the residential component are also more expensive. They're also more expensive than standalone residential space. So I think that buyers need to be aware of this. Well, I think we have to wrap it up now. So thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thanks our two expert panelists for spending their time with us and sharing with us such valuable insights. And I think what we have heard so far is that in terms of market timing, the Singapore market is at a very healthy state now. It's actually on a growth trajectory despite the pandemic. So timing seems to be okay. I think just now panelists have also shared their view that even in the event of a rise in interest rate, because of the TESR that the Singapore government has built in, is unlikely to affect our market negatively. So in terms of the location, it appears that after 20 years, the downtown area is ripe to be successful, to allow for live, work, and play, and in line with the Singapore Government Master Plan, to also decentralize and also to optimize transportation. As a result, downtown now has offered to home user as well as investor the ability to tap on all these hardware infrastructure that is already being built, as well as enjoy the various software that is already available in the downtown area. So I think with that, I would like to hand over the stage back to Alicia. Yep, Alicia, over to you.
Thank you, Winston, Nicholas, and Chern Woon for such an informative session.